I've just been going over like channel analytics or whatever and trying to see like what the most popular videos are so that way I can make more stuff kind of related to that sort of content. One of the biggest ones that I noticed is when I'm just repairing something. So this is an issue that I have had since I got this new monitor, because my old monitor was HDMI and everything worked perfect, and this one's Displayport and it has a black screen on boot. So we'll shut the computer down, and spoilers and stuff because I haven't released all of these videos. So I just have this thing on here just because there's a whole bunch of stuff that I've changed and those videos are going to come. So we can unplug the Displayport, we can plug in the HDMI, now we can turn the computer on, and I forgot to switch this to HDMI, but you'll be able to see that it works. Totally fine. And we're at the login screen here and everything's working as you would normally expect all of this to work. So let's shut this down again. Okay, so now I've switched back to Displayport, so now you can see what's going on. And this is just what I've been dealing with since I got this monitor. So now we're back on, we're running. It's on Displayport. Everything's back on. Black screen. Nothing's happening. Still nothing. And there we go, just like magic, and everything's working totally fine. Now basically what's happening right now is this monitor is DisplayPort 1.4, but because this graphics card is so old, like the BIOS in it is from 2017, so if we open IDA64, go to Display, and then GPU, and then in here you can see the date. Well, I mean, you can't really see it because I'm not screen recording all of this because I have to change driver things and I don't have a capture card. But the BIOS date is 2017-04-18. So this is from April 18th, 2017. Right now, it's Christmas Eve, 2021. So this BIOS is pushing very close to being 5 years old. DisplayPort 1.4 didn't exist when this card came out, so it doesn't know how to display that on post. That's why it works when it gets to Windows, because then Windows controls everything and it makes it all work. So now there's a tool called Nvidia Displayport Firmware Updater, and this tool is literally designed to enable Displayport 1.3 and 1.4 on cards where it's not supported. So we're just going to hit next. It's gathering system information. Now the screen's going to flash on and off and everything. That's completely normal. And I just wanted to point out that the BIOS version right now is 86.02.39.01.90. So it says right here that the Nvidia GeForce GTX 1080 Ti, an update is required. So let's just update. Now this specific card actually has two BIOS chips because this is an EVGA GTX 1080 Ti for the Win 3. So firmware updated successfully. Restart is required for new firmware to take effect. So now we can restart. Everything's going to be signed out. That's totally fine. So now it's restarting and the firmware has been updated. So now we get to see if the BIOS splash screen is going to come up on post. And there we have it. Works perfect. So now that root issue is basically fixed. But now the BIOS version hasn't actually changed. That tool is essentially patching the graphics card to make this work. But the graphics card is still outdated. So now we need a tool so we can update the BIOS. Now this isn't like 100% necessary because right now it's working and we don't have to do anything. DisplayPort 1.4 now works on boot. Everything is fixed. So if you came here specifically for that issue, then you're done. There's nothing left to do. But I want everything to be as updated as possible and it's optimized to be working as good as it possibly can. So now I need to find the BIOS for this card specifically. I'm going to try and screen record this part, but it might crash because the screen's going to flash on and off, and if that happens, then it's just going to corrupt the file. It's not going to work. First, we need a BIOS. So right here on Tech Power Up, there's a vBIOS collection of pretty much every single BIOS that people have dumped and then uploaded here. So these are not official, but they are direct extracts from video cards. So under GPU brand, I'm just going to organize this. So it is Nvidia. The card vendor for me is EVGA. And the card model is a 1080 Ti. Now, for the BIOS version, an easier way to actually find this is to look up what version you currently have, which the BIOS version on this card ends in 01.90. So if we look for 01.90, there's 4 different ones available. So we have for the Win 3, For the Win 3 Elite Gaming, and For the Win 3 Hybrid, which I know this isn't the hybrid. So to decide between these two cards right here, you can look them up. Now, this specific card right here has a higher memory clock than what mine has. So we need to use the For the Win 3 card. So we'll go back to all, and now we will go to the latest BIOS version right here, which is 41.92. So we'll click this, and then you can see that we have For the Win 3, which is the specific card that we were looking for. Now we can go to details, and that's going to tell us everything about this card right here. And under GPU device ID, this ends in 10DE. So now over on the GPU specs, which you can get from GPU-Z or IS64, just because I already bought this. And then right under PCI device, we have 10DE, which is right here. And then 1B06, 1B06. So everything there matches up, and then the GPU code name is GP102, which right here, it's GP102. And looking up the rest of the specs with the Nvidia sheet for all the details for the specific card, everything matches perfectly. So this is the BIOS that I need for my card. So we can download this BIOS, which I have over here on the desktop all ready to go. So we don't need anything here anymore, and we need to use NVFlash, but we can't just open it. Well, I mean, we can open it, but it's not going to work. It's not going to do anything. Right here, it basically just says your primary commands, and it says everything that we need to do. And then we're going to want to uninstall the display driver and then update it again. So now we have display driver uninstaller and the latest Nvidia driver as of right now. So first thing we have to do is open command prompt, and we're going to want to run this as administrator. Now in here, we have to change the directory to users, and then your username, and desktop. Now we're on the desktop. So now we can run NVFlash64, and when we open this here, you can see that removing write protection is just going to be -- protect off. So we can quit out of this, and we're going to go -- protect off. Now, this part right here is either going to corrupt this screen recording, or it's going to work fine. So now we can just hit enter. Oh my god, my volume just went on full for some reason. Oh yeah, okay, so recording error. So OBS crashed. So since the rest of the stuff is very straightforward, basically the exact same command, NVFlash64 -- and we're going to do save. And now we're going to want to save the BIOS that's currently on this card, or wherever we're doing all of this from. If you've put NVFlash into a specific folder somewhere and then change the directory to that folder, then that's where it's going to save. So we're just going to save this as like BIOS.ROM. They always have to end in .ROM. Now we can hit enter. That's going to start NVFlash64, which is going to extract the vBIOS from the card. And now on the desktop, we have a new file called bios.rom. So that's the factory BIOS from this card that we have saved. So now if anything goes wrong, we can always revert back to that at a later date, which is a little bit more technical. You either need integrated graphics or you need a second GPU to make that work, because if this flash fails, then we won't be able to use the GPU. Now, this GPU specifically has 2 EPROMs on it. So if this fails, there's just a little switch on the card that I can switch to the slave BIOS. Some of them will actually just say stock or overclock, and one of them will just have like a more aggressive fan curve or something built into it. So in this instance here, I'm safe because I have a secondary BIOS that I can just flip a switch to and then reboot the computer, and I'll be on that BIOS, so then I can repair whatever's going on. This is just what I was getting at with checking all of those numbers and making sure this is exact. Because if they don't match, or if anything goes wrong, then your card is going to be bricked until you have another graphics card that you can boot the computer from, so then you can use this to flash the factory BIOS that we saved. Here's open NVFlash again right here, check these primary commands, and all we want to do is update the vBIOS firmware. All we're going to do for this is just NVFlash64, because we're using the 64-bit version, and we're just going to pick the GPU BIOS for this graphics card that I already downloaded, which is right here. So I'm going to go back into command prompt, NVFlash64, and now we just want to put the file name for the BIOS that was downloaded. That's it. Now we can just hit enter. So now it is checked for the matches between the two versions, that the current version ends in 01.90, which we already know, and it's going to be replaced with 41.92, which we know because that's what we've downloaded. But it also says the ID, and we have to make sure that matches, which this one matches exactly. And that is what you want. And then the board number is also exactly the same. Now, if your display doesn't come back on like this, it's kind of sketchy because you didn't verify, which actually, if we open NV Flash, there's actually a compare. If you're not 100% yet, what you can do is type in NV Flash and then -- compare, and then put the file name to this BIOS beforehand. So actually, I'll show you that right now. So we'll cancel this, any other key to abort, so we'll just get out of here. This is just going to be reverted back just the way it was. So we're going to do NV Flash, and I'm just going to leave that file name in there, but I'm going to type in -- compare. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to read the vBIOS that's currently on the card, and it's going to compare it with the file that we're going to flash. Now, it's probably going to find a couple errors because this is going to be a new BIOS, which it did, mismatch error. But if we go up here, the Nvidia firmware comparison, it says that exact screen that we had just seen before. So this is where you can actually compare to make sure that this is going to match perfectly before you flash. So now that we've seen the comparison, we know it's going to work because this BIOS is for the exact same card that I currently have. So now we can go back down to the bottom and I can just run that first command again. So this is the one to flash it. And now, like I said, if your display does not come back on, you can just hit Y. And just depending on how fast your computer is and how fast everything is going to be flashing, it's usually safe to wait about 20 seconds between key inputs just to make sure that it had enough time to finish before you're actually touching anything. So I'm just going to hit Y. Now it's updating the firmware, and now a reboot is required. Now this is the portion where I was saying it's safe to wait somewhere around 20 seconds because it may not happen instantly, but if you turn it off when that's flashing, you're going to have a real bad time. Now all of this is done and we can reboot to take effect. But because the old graphics driver is still installed, reboot into safe mode so that way I can use Display Driver Uninstaller, DDU. So I'm just going to extract this to the desktop while we're here. So this folder right here is the one that we're going to be running. I have to restart the computer. Oops, I'm using Start 11, so I have that custom start menu. So Control to open the factory one. So if you're not running Start 11, then that isn't an issue for you. But if you need to get to the factory one while running Start 11, you just hold Control. So now that we're in the Start menu, like the factory one, you just hold Shift, click Power, and then click Restart. So now it's going to restart into like the recovery menu screen or whatever, like this screen here. And that's why we had to patch the card before doing this, because this screen is only going to work over the input that will work with post. So because this only worked with HDMI, we'll only be able to access safe mode on HDMI, but now that it's patched, I can access this on Displayport, which is why we had to patch it first. So now we're just going to go to Troubleshoot, Advanced Options, and we're going to go to the Startup Settings. Now in here, we can just reboot, and from this point right here, we would just continuously see a black screen if we didn't patch before doing this. But you can see the patch is still applied and everything is working. Now we can push 4. So now we're enabling safe mode. And once we're in, we just have to run DDU, which is just going to remove the display driver. So we can go to that DDU folder, Display Driver Uninstaller. Now sometimes there's like a little window or whatever that pops up. You just close it. Now we're going to pick the GPU driver, Nvidia. Everything's set, and we're going to clean and restart. That's it. So now it's just removing everything Nvidia on this computer. And then like magic, it's just going to restart itself. There we go. And obviously, we don't have a display driver installed. So now we can just install the latest Nvidia driver and everything is done. Well, I mean, everything is already done. Like if we open IDA64, go to Display, GPU, you can see right here, 4192. And this BIOS date is from 2018-03-09. So this is from March 9th, 2018. So it's almost a year newer than what was already currently on the card. So now normally I would be running the studio driver just for stability's sake for video editing. But for whatever reason I'm getting issues on Forza Horizon 5 now. I don't know what the latest update did, but it screwed up a whole bunch of stuff. So now I can only run it on the Game Ready driver. Oh, okay, we can see that Microsoft has taken over. It's updated the driver for us. Okay, perfect. So now we're just going to install this latest driver. Now, specifically me, I don't want or need the GeForce Experience, so I'm only going to be doing the graphics driver. And then I'm going to go to Custom and go to Perform Clean Install. So at least it'll attempt to remove the default driver that Windows has installed for the cleanest install. Now, I'm just going to let this do its thing. It's going to flash on and off or whatever, and then it's going to install the latest one. But essentially, everything's done at this point. There's only one final thing that you got to do. Sometimes the power limit won't be set correctly. So if we go back here to the vBIOS collection on Tech Power Up, we can go to the details for that BIOS that we downloaded for the specific card. And under the power limit right here, we have 358 watts. So to fix this, all we have to do is run a batch file. You'll just open Notepad and you can type in this entire command right here and then just change the section at the end here where it says PL for power limit and where it says 358, we're just going to pick the power limit for this card right here, 358. Now you would save as, change the save file type to all files, and then just type in bat to make this into a batch file. Now all we have to do is just right click and run this as administrator. And that's going to run, do its own thing. It's already done. So now we can just restart the computer because the driver's done. And everything at this point is 100% complete. We've fixed the Displayport issue, so now Displayport 1.3 and 1.4 are fully compatible with the graphics card, and we've updated the vBIOS to the latest version, so everything is as update as it can be. It's completely stable, and everything is now fully working. Hopefully you got something useful out of this. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, or, I don't know, don't do any of it. I'm not telling you what to do.